Good afternoon and welcome to another GemCap Academy. It is my pleasure once again to welcome an old friend of the podcast, Attilio Graziano. How are you, sir?
I'm good, and thank you for having me here. It's always a pleasure.
Well, we catch you towards the end of the summer here in 2025. How's your summer been?
Very good. I take summer as a chance to give back, which is something that I want to pass as an heritage on my son as well and the rest of the family. And yeah, it's like, summer is very short, at least here in the US. It's, mid-August and everything got back to normal already.
Well, Europe's still on holiday, so
Yeah.
don't bother getting hold of most of mainland Europe.
Yeah.
But yes, it's coming to an end, but it's coming. And there's a lot of things going on. We obviously have lots of things going on in the geopolitical world with what's
Yeah.
happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Gaza, Palestine, and Israel, and just generally we've had what could be an interesting 2025 so far with Trump being in the presidency with his tariffs, and just generally the world has been a very interesting place, and it's been a challenging place. From your perspective, sitting as you do in the US, how are you seeing things at the moment?
It's very accurate that you made a reference to Ukraine, because I was following very briefly what was happening over the weekend, the meeting between Trump and Putin, and I see that now there is a sort of a coalition between Europe and Ukraine to front Trump, and basically this, in if we look at it in our world. It's a little bit of a reminder as to whether it still makes sense for an American manager with a Cayman fund to try the old route of going to Europe.
I mean, it's essentially a reference to that because obviously US offshore funds were very, very dominant for US managers to go into the global markets. In more recent times, we've seen UCITS becoming the dominant product. And obviously, in very recent times, we as GemCap, with our merger with MC Squared, will be offering out the alternatives regime through the Luxembourg and ultimately through into Dublin as well. Do you see the future of US offshore funds still being a dominant force later this year and next year for US managers trying to access international monies?
But in fairness, I think that there is going to be a percentage of managers who will try the old route, right?
Yeah.
I think that where you have a solid introduction, there might be family offices who are willing to invest into a Cayman fund. I don't see that being ruled out completely. But I also see that Europe has been preparing itself to cut the UK out, because the UK managers also use Cayman funds, right? And so basically, there's a sort of a series of measures that can as well be used for US managers, and that might be used in case the geopolitical situation gets a little bit more tense. And at the same time, I also think that there have been a lot of things evolving in the concept of marketing, in the concept of pre-marketing. And we are in a sort of a distribution 2.0 type of environment, where going there with a Cayman fund isn't necessarily the smartest move, considering that you will have to now your position towards sustainability, and you will have to do a reporting with local authorities. And I think that basically, given that there are platform solutions also in the alternative investment space, it might be worth to consider that and minimize some of the costs of distribution as well.
Sure. The challenges, and you know, as you know, Tilly, I can talk about distribution till the cows come home. And I bore people on the challenges of distribution. And I remember full well when we first formed as a business back in 2009, you know, the manager who approached us on literally day 2 when we formed wanted to launch a Cayman product. And we just turned around and said, well, who are you selling it to? And in fact, they didn't really know. And you know, a valuable lesson there, you know, having worked with the big old houses previously, we never questioned who we were selling it to because we knew who we were selling it to. It was the marketplace, and we knew the marketplace. But we were a UK manager selling into the UK space. If you're a US manager selling into the global space, in the international markets, you've really got to know who you're selling it to, because if you're selling a product which is, well, maybe priced incorrectly, and Cayman, you know, you often get the old hedge fund style of 2 plus, you know, 2 and 20 and things like that. That just doesn't work. And then you've also got to look from the plumbing point of view. The platforms struggle these days to take on board non-UCITS. They'll look at AVES, but when it comes to Caymans, they will struggle, particularly some of the bigger platforms across Europe and into the UK. So that becomes a challenge. I think if the fund managers think about launching a US offshore fund in the next 12 months, they've got to know who they're selling it to, and they've got to make sure there's pipeline before they even attempt to start bringing it together. I mean, you must see that all the time when you're talking to US managers.
Yeah, I've seen that. Basically, I look at it more from the angle of the trust that European investors can give to these structures, right? So I've seen that there are European management companies that manage these Cayman funds, and that probably gives a little bit more comfort, but it doesn't reduce the headache that you have when you want to have a fund authorized in Germany, for instance, that comes with a little bit of a bigger overhead. And there are certain markets where you could have an audience, but you're not allowed to, like Italy or perhaps Spain. And I still think that it's good to test the waters, but basically nowadays you can test the water through the pre-marketing that it didn't exist before, right? So you can engage with a management company and basically go and test the waters.
Well, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, because a lot of firms forget about that. About you can't just get on a plane and go and talk to investors. It's a big no-no, isn't it?
The pre-marketing, it was clarified that only a management company or a MiFID license can sort of chaperone these managers. And so I think that distribution 2.0 calls for different tools. And I think that we are also at a stage in the industry where there is sufficient maturity to be able to offer a platform solution, also in the alternatives, that basically is more efficient from a cost perspective than having the Cayman fund.
Well, we'll talk. I'd like to talk about products in a moment, but let's just finishing off on this distribution thing. You said a word there which does resonate, and you mentioned chaperoning. I'm sorry to catch you off guard here, but that whole chaperoning. Can we just talk about that very briefly for our viewer, as to explain exactly what we mean by chaperoning? I'm old-fashioned, and a chaperone would be someone who would come along with me when I had a date back in the 19th century. I'm that old. What do we mean by chaperoning for fund managers today who are trying to market into Europe?
Yeah, the pre-marketing, which is the one of the creation of the cross-border distribution directive, is where you go and test the waters with an idea with European investors. And basically the concept there is that you cannot do it by yourself unless you are either a management company or an investment firm or another type of credit institution. And so that creates that opportunity for management companies to offer this service that we could call of chaperoning, whereby there is an understanding or an handshake that if there is sufficient traction with investors, then the fund is launched under the purview of that specific management company. And I think that it makes, I mean, I'm pretty sure that it is as easy to build a Cayman fund and go and try to sell it. But I think that nowadays there is less of, I have to find the correct adjective here. I think that basically there is less of commitment to the market, and it's like, you know, I think that investors want to see also commitment, and that commitment comes with having at least the idea of hosting it in Europe as a strategy as well.
Yeah, I think we need to be clear here that I think if you Google chaperoning services for Europe, you come up with a completely different area here. So, you know, be mindful of that. I think what we're talking about here is utilizing effectively a third-party marketing business to chaperone you. So, you know, for the fund managers out there listening to this, don't think a chaperone is different from a TPM. It's very, very similar. In fact, almost identical. It's just the outcomes be slightly different because, as you were saying there, Attilio, it's the pre-marketing. It's trying to work out where the demand is, what the demand is, etc. So go to TPMs, see whether they offer chaperoning services. Not all do. I know that for a fact. But if people want to contact me, I can put them in touch with chaperoning services.
The TPM licensed under MiFID would as well work for.
They need to be licensed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very important. Let's move on now just to product. Now, one of my favorite Christmas movies is Elf. You know, which is a great movie. We have something similar in the private markets area with LTIFs.
Yes.
This is a whole new area. I've been to a number of conferences over the last 2 years, I guess now, talking about LTIFs. Again, for our viewers, can you summarize the whole concept behind LTIFs?
I can, in as little as possible. So basically, the move here was to create another brand as strong and trustworthy as the UCITS, right? And the game was to open up these alternative strategies with a longer term sort of investment horizon, also to retail investors. And basically, the first attempt was a fiasco, honestly. And many people are saying, rightly so, that there were some design flaws in the regulation that had made this product a little bit more difficult to sell. There were restrictions for retail investors because they could invest only 10% of their portfolio if the portfolio was a certain size, no more than 10,000 euros. I think that in addition to that, retail investors didn't really have a taste for this long-term type of investments. And then basically, few years down the line, I think a decade down the line, European policymakers are a little bit under pressure to meet all these items on their agenda, like green transition, which is very dear to you, and digital transition as well. And so they have tried to simplify the concept of LTIFs. And since 2024, when the second iteration of the regulation came out, there has been much more traction. And I've seen clients launching LTIFs that have 1,000 euros sort of minimum investment size. And everyone who has a strategy that could fit within the paradigm are launching one. Now, in fairness, the launching an LTIF for retail investors comes also with some complexities because you have to be able as a TA or an administrator to manage all these small tickets that come through. But I also think that it's working. 1 in 3 retail investors, one in 3 investors, according to EFAMA, there's a report of Asset Management 2024, says that 1 in 3 is a retail client. And basically, there is something interesting that happened with LTIFs, because usually you would launch a fund, either a UCITS, either out of Luxembourg or Ireland, right? If you wanted to go cross-border. With LTIFs, you had a lot of Italian LTIFs and French LTIFs because they were mono-market, right? And now it's like, you start seeing more of the Luxembourg fund and also the Irish LTIFs, which is something new, that are coming onto the market. And Ireland did something interesting, making sure that an LTIF can be approved in 24 hours if it's for either professional or disqualified investors. That is a category that doesn't exist in Europe yet, but in certain countries where you can invest minimum 100,000 euros in a fund. And that's interesting. And I think that basically we'll see many more. And in the UK, there was another interesting story, because they grandfathered it when Brexit came, right? But they dropped the E because it wasn't European anymore. And it became LTIF. And then now it's LTAF, so long-term assets funds. But as I was looking at it recently, I think that basically there are 30 of these funds out nowadays in the UK, and you have at least 200 LTIFs. But basically the LTIF wasn't at the beginning a retail product. I think that basically that's what happened. The UK was a little bit more conservative. It wasn't a retail product. And now it's become one of these restricted mass market products. And there is this new Leeds reforms that came out, and they are proposing to put it in the ISA, in the stock and share ISA, which is one way to expand the scope. So I don't know, it's going to be very interesting. I don't think it's going to live out of the
It'll be interesting to see from a UK perspective. Obviously, we've got a new government in just over a year. We've got a new chancellor who's got a bit of a challenge ahead of her, no doubt about it, Rachel Reeves. The pensions market is going to come under a bit of pressure. A lot of people talking now, what next? Where's Rachel Reeves going to get her next few pounds? And the pensions market is going to come under attack. There's unequivocal than that one. I think everybody's saying where can she drag a bit of money? It's be inheritance tax or anything like that. Pensions tax is going to be the next one. So I think the LTAF could have a place within the ISA and replacing some pension products down the line. Who knows? The UK market, and you mentioned Brexit, and if you want to, raise my hackles, mention Brexit. Yes, as a European, I personally feel aggrieved about Brexit, but hey, everyone had a vote, but there you go. But it has caused us in the UK to develop whole new lines of regulation, and we, from a GemCap in Ireland point of view, have just gone through the OFR. In fact, we're actually currently still in it, in getting the acceptance on the OFR. So our platform is getting accepted. It's been going there for several weeks now. We hope to hear very shortly. But again, for the benefit of our viewer, do you want to explain about the UK OFR regime, and also you want to talk about Consumer Duty, because that is one of those things that we take on seriously when we talk to fund managers, and I will talk about that towards the end. But tell us about the UK OFR and what it means for investors.
Yeah, I think that basically your platform is very well positioned for this OFR, for the very same reason that you sit in the UK and not only the UK market, but also the UK rules. Because I think that one of the issues for European managers wanting to stay in the UK market post-Brexit is that they were under the impression that nothing had changed since the times of the passport, right? Instead, as a European manager, you are now facing issues and you are exposed to regulation that before wasn't a concern, like the financial promotion regime, right, which was typically for UK products and UK actors, now comes into play for users as well. And I think also the issue of the value for money. Now we have seen few clients from Europe, from established markets, coming to us and asking for support on the recognition with an ongoing charge figure of 3%, right? And now basically the reality is that a regulator, when it comes to value for money, regulators are always very wary and they don't want to be seen as price regulators. But that type of figure is going to raise questions, right, on the actual value that you can bring to investors. And go ahead.
I was about to say that I'm a great believer in market forces. If you think about how if you think where this is all going, it's all to protect consumers, the end consumer. That end consumer today tends to be so far down the chain because of platforms, be it banks, be it Clearstreams, or whatever it may be, that they will be an intermediated client. They'll have somebody between them and the fund, and as a consequence of that, they will be advised as to where to go to the fund, and the market force will effectively, because of performance, because of fees and charges, natural forces will push those funds out of the debate. So if there's a fund which is underperforming, has got high charges, it won't get chosen. It'll become subscale and will then eventually become uneconomic and will be closed.
Yeah,
I do understand where the regulator's coming from as far as stopping cowboys, but when did you last see a cowboy in the fund industry? You could argue maybe Woodford was one, but that was don't get me started on Woodford. But it's very, very rare that there's an advisor or some advisory element within the value chain that an investor would get a poorly performing fund on a poor price. So yes, it's all very well bringing consumer duty, and we've had value assessments, all these sort of things we've had in the past. No one ever reads them. What was the point? Now, we as a board of the platform, we will do value assessments on the Irish, because we're obviously an Irish platform. You still have a board, obviously, for consumer duty on UK funds. In both cases, they will say this fund is underperforming. This fund is subscale. This fund has got high charges because the expense ratio is too high because the funds are, and they will naturally push the price down. Because their sole job is to represent the end consumer.
Yeah,
they don't represent the fund manager, and we've seen a lot of funds this year falling foul of consumer duty, and that's a natural progression. You actually look at the number of funds closing as a result of being subscale. That number has remained pretty constant over the years. It doesn't have peaks or troughs. It's pretty constant, and that's natural cycle of funds are being successful or not, and they get consolidated away, get merged away. So whilst I applaud the regulator, I think our industry is so mature, it will create the natural attrition rate that they're looking for. That's my view. I may be wrong.
No, I agree with you, and I like that you used this term attrition. And I think that basically Americans are going to do very well in this new climate, especially the ETFs that tends to be very, very competitive on price. And I think that in Europe there is generally, I agree with you on the fact that it's an issue of scale.
Yep.
And sometimes the cost is justified. Well, the cost is a function of not having sufficient assets. But I don't think that the UK is the market to do that. And it's much more competitive. And I've seen clients having this challenge of having to understand what consumer duty meant for them, which before wasn't a concern, and what type of assessment on the value they had to put together.
Yeah,
For the
I would say, however, just my experience, and you probably have a similar experience. We've had a number of conversations with US-based managers who, when we explain the fact the UK is a massively broke marketplace, it's oversupplied, that the pricing for funds is gone down. And we're not just talking about the investment management fee, but generally the consolidation on pricing has been significant over the last few years. So we do have to suddenly flag with managers, I say particularly in the US, where you say you can't get away with selling a fund on 150 bips, a global equity mandate, double small cap. You got to be sub 100, and in some cases a lot less than 100. We worked with a manager recently, and they had a global value fund that went out there, and it went out for 45 bips. Back in the day, that was fixed income, that was credit. Now it's equities. So there's been a big shift in those pricing. But again, that's the natural economics of the way this industry works. So which is good.
But let me ask, the US is also a big brand, low cost market, a little bit like the UK.
Vanguard.
Do you think that these US managers still believe that there is a mismatch and they can price higher their products because they are used to lower prices here already, right?
True. I mean, if you had people who, for whatever reason, say, "Oh, we want the fund to be cheaper," and you go, "Well, you're asking us to take 10 bips off the investment management fee, but actually this fund will outperform in good markets, hundreds of bips over the market. So, why are you chasing the 10 bips?" I think people focus on price more than they should do. I mean, you do need to be careful. If you've got two identical funds, you go for the cheaper one. But it's been rare you have identical funds. So I think people need to be mindful of that. And I'm mindful that the US investors have had huge players. UK tends to be small, lots of smaller players out there.
Exactly.
Let's touch on, again, we touched on Brexit before. Accessing Europe from the UK is, and we touched on chaperoning before, it is a bit of a challenge. Post-Brexit, that dreaded word. What's the advice that you're giving US managers at the moment when it comes to trying to access, for UK managers accessing into Europe?
Yeah, it's funny that you say this because recently there was this reform proposed of the appointed representative regime in the UK, right? And so I was thinking how easy it was before in a passporting for the UK climate, whereby an American or a Brit could enter into an appointed representative regime type of engagement and then go to Europe and be free to do road shows and approach investors. Nowadays, I think that there is a consolidated workaround, right? Which translates in an additional cost of business and in a decision on the European domicile where this UK or US managers want to establish these shell companies to act as tied agent of MiFID entities. I think that basically I have seen them all. Portugal, Malta. I've heard recently about Liechtenstein as well. Germany. I think that basically all these domiciles have a different practice and custom, because the difference with the appointed representative regime, where the appointed representative acts as its own type of person and activity, in the tied agent regime, you should really be working for the principal firm, which in essence mean that the principal firm should profit in a way from the activity of the tied agent. And so I've seen that this is achieved differently in different domiciles. In Germany, for instance, the principal has to be part of the agreement, has to receive the payment and then take its share. Maybe in Portugal, there is a more relaxed and casual approach on that, but you have more stringent requirement on the substance. I think that basically the Liechtenstein is a country to keep on the radar, because it's
Okay.
it's a nascent type of environment for financial services. But I think that basically there is always going to be that percentage of people who are going to fly into a place and attend to a cup into event or a conference. But then again, whenever you want to get more trust, and you should show some commitment.
Yeah. It's like the old, where did this trade come from? Oh, it was reverse solicitation. You go, really? Yeah, prove that. Yeah, I always find that interesting. I think Liechtenstein, that's news to me. I wasn't aware that was the case. I know certain of our competitors, I know there's one big firm is in Portugal. I know there's a service provider works out in Germany. Malta's an interesting one as well. I think that's a possibility. It does frustrate me that the big powerhouses of Luxembourg and Dublin, Luxembourg and Ireland, have yet to really embrace that. I think that's a missed opportunity for MiFID distribution capabilities. But hey ho, that's what they choose. Now, as we come to the end of our conversation, it's always great to catch up with you, Attilio. You're a font of huge knowledge, and really grateful for your time today. Now, viewers won't know this, but you've got a very good YouTube channel, which bizarrely pops up on my TV at home, and my wife keeps on saying, "Who's that chap on the screen there?" Which is great. So I recommend people to search for you on YouTube. Where else can they get in access to the information that you share? I'm sure there's a commercial arrangement to be had somewhere.
Yeah, no, I've recently started newsletter on Substack, which is a platform for newsletter that is called Time to Fast Forward. And it's a weekly edition where I touch on the topics that I am curious about and that relate mostly to distribution, and that I don't normally host on the website Venezian Partners, where we have a section on that is called European Funds Masterclass, where we talk specifically about issues on distribution and regulation.
Okay, but well, I strongly recommend people go and look at that. But in the meantime, and for now, thank you for your time, Attilio. I look forward to seeing you when you visit the UK next time, or maybe I'll come to Miami. I don't know. Let's see. All right. For now, thank you very much for your time.